Um, Everybody, thank you for giving up your time this morning. I know how busy you all are. I know in the situation that we all find ourselves in, it's an incredibly difficult time, but I'm very, very grateful for you giving up your very precious time. I hope you'll find the next hour very helpful and very useful. The great thing about our sector is how proactive we are, and we're really good at sharing. And hopefully you'll gain the confidence today to continue to take your rugby programs forward, and the opportunity will arise for the sharing of good practice, sharing of ideas, and the more we can do that, the better it will be. So I'm looking forward to the next hour. I will be hosting the Q&A, as Mike said, but before we go any further, I'd like to introduce Dean Hardman from the AOC, who's the Director of Sport and Student Experience. Dean's just going to give us a little bit of an update on the wider picture in terms of AOC. So without any further ado, over to Dean.
Morning, everybody. Thanks, Martin. Yet again, it's nice to see some familiar names and faces on this webinar. As many of you will know, I started with AOC and AOC Sport back in February, and it's a real shame that I've not had a chance to meet many of you in person yet, although the number of Zoom calls I've been on, it kind of feels like I already have in some cases. Obviously, it's a very frustrating time for everyone at the moment. As ever, it's kind of an ever-changing situation. And in particular, in reference to the recent lockdown and the current restrictions, it does just feel at times that announcements are made and then it's only after that that the detail is worked out. So we at AOC Sport are working really hard to get some clarity, particularly from the DFE. But at the moment, I think it's probably fair to say that there are probably more questions than there are answers. And I'm very hopeful that we can use this next hour to identify some new questions that we've not thought of, hopefully answer some of the questions that you might have. I just really wanted to share our AOC Sports overarching position when it comes to the provision of sport competitions and development opportunities this year, which is obviously a really strange year, unusual year, and there's been many restrictions in place. Our view and our philosophy at the moment is very much that even if it's very minimal, we aspire to put on competitions and development opportunities as soon as we possibly can. So it's not in our mind at the moment that, well, it's near the end of the year, we'll just leave it. We're very, very keen that even if there's a narrow window of opportunity, that we maximise that window of opportunity when the government and when the RFU, in the case of rugby, say that it's safe to do so. So I guess I'd like to reassure colleagues that if you've entered competitions, whether they be sevens competitions, 15s competitions, even if we can't give you at the moment a date on which those events will start, it is currently not in our mind that we will not run any of that activity. We will try our very best to run that activity. As many of you will know, we'd planned on a November start for most of our competitions. Obviously, that wouldn't have included rugby union in its full form because of where we are with the return to play roadmap. But obviously that's been put back. We're still very optimistic for a January start for our competitions, leagues and cups in other sports, albeit our regional tournaments, and I know that there's some sevens rugby played within those regional tournaments. We do anticipate making an announcement soon that they will be pushed back to slightly later in the calendar. So do watch this space for that announcement. But again, just to reiterate, we still want to run those events and we're still hoping to do so, even if it's in a modified form, obviously COVID secure. In terms of the current situation with this existing national lockdown of sorts, I had been expecting some guidance or a new statement from the Department for Education, and I'd hoped that we would have that statement ready for this webinar. As with many of the announcements that we've been expecting throughout this pandemic, things haven't quite worked out that way, and we haven't seen that announcement made yet. We are expecting it imminently. That guidance will be static guidance. It's guidance that will be in place for the entire, or is intended to be in place for the entire winter. And we are very optimistic and confident that the guidance will be clear that college extracurricular activities, enrichment activities, including team sports and team training, will be permitted, provided they are following COVID secure guidance and following the governing bodies, in this case the RFU's, return to play plan. That announcement would always be superseded by national restrictions such as those that are in place at the moment. We know that schools and some colleges are continuing with enrichment activities, including team training in team sports, albeit in a modified format in the case of rugby, even throughout this lockdown. And that's because their principals have interpreted the guidance in their own way, which is obviously fine, and it's their right to do so. But as we're going to come on to Mark Saltmarsh in a moment, clearly there is RFU guidance that we should all be following. We're urgently seeking guidance from DFE about the nature of enrichment and extracurricular activities at the moment, and in probably any subsequent lockdowns. And as things stand, we think that steer is going to be that team training can continue in circumstances such as those that we're in at the moment, provided they're timetabled and all the relevant guidance and protocols are being followed. If we do get that confirmation from DFE, we'll obviously pass that on to Mark and the team at the RFU for them to make a decision on whether to issue an update to their guidance. So obviously we'll work closely with the RFU and ECRFU in issuing any information of that nature. In the meantime, right now, it's obviously a very difficult time to have young people in colleges playing rugby for all the reasons I've just explained and we all know about. I draw your attention to our round the world challenge that we're running, which is not rugby, but it's keeping people fit and contributing to a sense of community within colleges at the moment. So that's a Strava challenge, not dissimilar to the one that we ran in the summer, albeit slightly different. So I would encourage you to look at our social media feeds and our website to get involved with that and engage your players with it. We obviously support the RFU's programs, some of their modified formats, and their plans to play the game in the new year. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Mark Saltmarsh, who can give us a little bit more information as to where the RFU are at the moment when it comes to what we can do at the moment and hopefully what we'll be able to do in the future.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Dean. Morning, everyone. Dean, I hope you managed to get released from prison soon. But thanks very much for your update and also for your support over the last week and 10 days on exactly what you've talked about, trying to get some clarity. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. I've got a couple of brief slides just to show. So if I do that, hopefully you'll be able to see it. Shout if that isn't coming up. So just wanted to give a very brief update following on from what Dean said, which is clearly really helpful in terms of the broader context. Just first of all, really looking at what rugby looks like in lockdown. Hopefully you can see that. So our guidance, absolutely, as Dean has said, is in line with the government guidance and Public Health England guidance, particularly from Department for Education, and we also ably advised by Dean are waiting for that confirmation around activity in colleges at the moment. So, however, as things stand for us, schools and colleges, the curriculum time activity that's part of a programme of study, as far as we're concerned, that continues at the moment, which might be during a course, a BTEC, diploma, A-level, PE, or whatever it is, that carries on for now. That's part of the rugby programme ongoing. In addition to that, the clarity we're all looking for around what extracurricular rugby can take place is going to help. However, at the moment, we're saying that as long as it's part of that college day, that the wraparound care that you provide for your students, that's always been there and was in place on the 2nd of September, let alone the 6th of November, that's the information that we're having at the moment, that can carry on, but we will get more clarity on that as well. So I think we're keen to get as much detail as we can, as Dean has outlined. The formats of the game are the NGB action plan that we've had approved by the government. So what you were able to play in your college from a rugby point of view before half term and before lockdown is what you can play now. So that's ready for rugby and O2 touch if you're playing in a game format. You can still do some limited contact training within your rugby sessions. And obviously that's part of what can continue as well. And then that is the same as what was available for stage D. We're not saying, and we're being very careful to say that school and college rugby isn't still at stage D, where the rest of the game has gone back to stage A, because stage D did involve being able to play into college rugby, and that is definitely not part of what can take place at the moment, as you're all aware. So no into college rugby, so it's not stage D, but the formats of the game that were within there are still allowed as well. And the other thing to be clear about is our action plan also includes things that need to be in place both on the pitch but also off the pitch as well. So group numbers, sizes, etc., are still as they were before half term and before lockdown. So that's where we are at the moment. We've also in the process at the moment of updating the Return to Rugby kit bag, which we've outlined on these webinars before, and Elise has included in a number of the ECRFU mailings, etc. And we'll continue to do that. So we've got an extra special lockdown version, which will hopefully land in the next 24 hours with you. We'll make sure that's pushed out. And again, that includes information right across the board of the types of areas that schools, colleges and universities are after. So in there will be information about those formats I've just talked about, the guidance for restarting, the off-pitch guidance as well, and our view on where we're going in future. And just to finish off with that, really, the important point that Dean has made, we absolutely agree with, is we want all colleges who play rugby to continue to do so. But we know that there are a whole range of protective measures, different decisions that principals and senior leadership teams have to make to be able to do that. It's absolutely the decision of the college and your expertise in knowing what the conditions that are right from a COVID point of view that you've gained over the last 6 months that are way beyond what we have. So we've got a framework that you can play to, but the decision whether you're going to play in line with DFE guidance is absolutely the college's decision. Just to finish, we are working on a return to play format. We're working with government, Public Health England, and actually with World Rugby on an adapted format to the adult game, as well as the age grade game. And that you'll have seen in the media, that's looking at options around a game with no or less scrums and mauls to reduce the face-to-face contact. And that's work that we're really trying to push on so that when we're back from lockdown and we get towards a return to playing the game back in clubs as well, we're able to have a format of the game that does include contact. We can't make any promises on that. We've been working on this with government for some time, and we'll continue to do so and continue to push to have a format of the game that does involve contact when we return. And the final thing to say on that really is that our aim has always been since March to make sure that every player, we're talking about the age grade game here, but it's across the whole game, who played rugby in March gets to play rugby this season. And as well, every club and every college and every school and university does as well. We're going to be in this together. When the game comes back, more than ever, our sport is going to have to focus on retaining players, and that will be the priority that any player actually in any environment should matter to all of us. We say we're the ultimate team sport. We're going to have to step up and prove it when we get back to playing. So that's something we're really starting to focus on now, is how can we all, as a game, make sure every player who wants to play in whatever environment it is able to do so. I'm going to pass to Mike now, who's going to take us on to the next part of the session.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. This links in quite nicely, actually. So thanks for the update as well, Dean. So this next session, hello, everyone. We're going to look at just a little bit of a discussion around actually just following those updates, really, in terms of actually what can we do around keeping players engaged. What has gone on in the sector. So instead of listening to us talking, I'm going to invite a few people in just to support us with this in terms of what has gone on and actually what has the implications been over the last couple of weeks. So I'm pleased to be joined by two of our England Colleges RFU reps, Chris Wall and Dale Smallman, and Keith Brooking from Exeter College and Exeter Chiefs. So, morning, guys.
Morning.
Okay, is Chris on as well?
Yeah, morning.
Morning, mate. Do you want to put your camera on if you can? So everyone can see us. That's great. That's great. Yeah, thanks, guys. And of course, as we mentioned before, we'd love to hear from those of you that listening as well before we kick start. So we're going to open this up with a little bit of a poll, if that's all right. So we'd love to hear from you. So if you look out for the poll that's going to be launched, and it'll just be asking you really about what has your rugby offer looked like this academic term. So if you have a look at that for us, players, please do have a look at it, and then we'll be sharing the results as they come through, and it'll kickstart our discussion. Okay, that's spot on. Coming through now, which is great. Okay, guys, brilliant. Get those votes in, guys, if you can. I know it sometimes can go on a little bit long, since we've got over 50 people putting little votes on. But keep them up. Okay, that's great. That's great, Elisa. You can launch that. I think that gives us a good little kickstart in terms of what's going on. Okay, guys. So we'll use those poll results there, and actually probably links, as you can see there, it links with training only, which links to the roadmap, exactly what Mark's just updated, and actually what we caught up about as well. And there's a big chunk there in terms of ready for rugby. No surprise, so that's the improved version of the game. And then a bit of enrichment. So we'll actually go on to that in terms of actually what's changed over the last guidance. So I'm going to kick off to you guys really in terms of that's the poll results that we've had from the audience in terms of actually so this academic year with you guys in terms of how has your rugby offer looked like? What's been the biggest successes with Ready for Rugby so far? Anyone want to start? Keith, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, we're lucky we've got a large intake of rugby players within our college. So we've got the luxury of actually being able to do various different parts within the programme. We've focused mainly, obviously, on skills with regards to Ready for Rugby and the stage that we're at with regards to RFU. And we actually introduced an internal league that we could play against each other. So that's the sort of focus we went down, trying to generate. We were just conscious that the guys haven't had any rugby since September, and they all play and have that competitive edge. So as a group of coaches, we decided to go down that route. And the first half up to half term was all to do with that league and how we could improve them within that league and the skills for that. And it was just a simple touch tournament using the basis of the Ready for Rugby and their guidelines, but just enhancing it slightly with what we wanted to get out of it. So that's the route we went down with regards to our programme. I can give you more details on what we did within that touch, or if you want to move to someone else, then...
No, we'll move on, because of course we can share these, can't we, after stuff. So, I mean, Chris, I know that you guys worked hand in hand there. There's anything in terms of outside of that rugby programme, the logistics side of things, in terms of what you had to battle as an institution that might be relevant to
Yeah, I think so. I mean, morning, everyone. I think that the key for us was how important sport, the role that sport plays, and obviously not just rugby here, but in the core values of rugby, but sport in general. And I think a lot of the students coming similar to going to a university, and how their life at a college is influenced by sport and meeting different groups of people. So I think that we made a decision very early on that we were going to try and deliver academy sports as much as we could in what we've delivered before. And in essence, that's a lot of students, a lot of facilities. Yes, there was some difficulties around that, but we've managed, I think, to do it. We're still retaining some of that delivery now during lockdown, and obviously all sorts of things coming in and influence that. The University of Exeter, which I'm sure people know, is just up the road. We use their facilities a lot as a part of a partnership, but they've closed for 4 weeks, which meant our basketball, netball, tennis, hockey, women's rugby can't use their facilities. So particularly now during this 4-week period, we've had to reduce the academy delivery, not as a direct influence of COVID, because we're open and lessons are happening, but because we need to reduce the number of students at a particular venue because of the risks involved. And so we've gone to a 50% delivery. So we are doing one practical session and one sort of remote session each week. We've been able to retain coaching hours, which is the lecturing staff who do deliver. So the hours that in essence they're not having now in practical, they can actually do some work behind the scenes to create, and Keith can talk a bit more about what we've done for rugby, but create psychology, hit sessions or whatever to students remotely on a Wednesday afternoon when fixtures would normally be happening.
That's great. That's great. So Dale, you've had a different, I mean, so again, we're still looking at in terms of what the rugby offer looked like and what did Ready for Rugby look like before second lockdown. Different animal with yours, isn't it? So in terms of actually, what have you done to keep players engaged and enthused?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we're very much Shrewsbury College. We're coming from more of a participation level. So we are that classic animal, which we have Wednesday afternoon enrichment. That's it. So we get a group of players together and put those fixtures on every Wednesday afternoon. We don't have the luxury of any additional training at the moment, even though we're trying to move into maybe having an additional session. One of the things that we did, obviously, pre-second lockdown is, again, similar to what Keith has done there, but maybe on a much smaller level because we don't have that amount of players, is we just set up what we call the varsity game. So we split the rugby players into two unique teams, and we made quite a big thing of one of the Wednesday afternoons where we tried to replicate as best we could a Wednesday afternoon experience by, two dressing rooms, the kits being up, getting an external referee to come and referee it. And we actually got the media students from the college as well to video it, and there must have been about half a dozen around the pitch taking pictures, just to try and give those players some experience. They really enjoyed it. It was a great afternoon. And when we come out of this second lockdown, which I can talk about what we did or what we're trying to do in lockdown 2 later, is we would try and replicate that again. The players have asked if they could do that, a couple more times. So it's almost like a series of varsity games against each other.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, we'll come on to that in a minute, actually, Dale, because I'm really interested. I mean, that's especially, and I'm sure everyone listening will be keen to actually understand with the implications of last week and so on. And that player voice is so important, isn't it, in terms of keeping players engaged and putting it at the heart of everything we do, which is fab. So some great examples there, guys. But of course, as Mark mentioned, we're at a certain process at the moment, of course, and we've got some DFE guidance. And so last Wednesday posed different challenges for us as the community game moved to stage A. There's then lots of guidance from DFE around actually what we could what we can and can't do across the education sector. And as Mark's alluded to it already, so we can continue with programs or curriculum or timetable activity. But of course, with a lot of colleges, that won't be there. Their rugby offer may be an enrichment opportunity. So we have to be careful with that. So again, as Mark's mentioned, we can't call it stage D because we can't have inter or intra matches. So I think what will be really relevant for everyone to understand is actually what have we done now since last Wednesday? So actually, what do the programs look like now? How have you continued to engage with them? Has there been no change for some? Because of course it's timetabled in. And actually, what are you doing to keep them ready for actually when we kickstart to come out of lockdown? Does anyone want to kick us off?
Yeah, from our point of view, we've obviously stopped all games and things like that. We're just now focusing purely on skills for the next 4 weeks. We've taken it as an opportunity of players that wouldn't necessarily have the time to hone a skill that obviously coincides with whatever the restrictions are. So during one of our remote sessions, we actually sent out, using all the tools through Microsoft, the Microsoft Forms, what they've learned over the first 6 weeks, what they've improved on in the first 6 weeks, and what they also want to improve on. And using that just simple Microsoft Form questions, they all come back saying they want to improve left-hand passing, for example, or things like that. So we've now focused our skills for the one physical session we got purely on those aspects from their feedback. So it's not so much of us coaches saying, right, we need to do this, this, and this. We are actually getting the feedback from the players so they can see the enhancements of, oh, I need to improve, and then let me do that now. Now we've got this block of 4 weeks where things are slightly more restricted. We're actually giving them the opportunity to actually improve a skill that they don't often get the chance to do. So that's the route we've gone down for the next 4 weeks.
Right. So again, you put it straight onto the players' onus and ask them, put them right at the heart of everything.
Exactly.
So now there's some online bits that you started to do as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, so we got one remote session each week, and we've been doing for probably like 3 or 4 weeks previously, purely to stop students coming into the college when they didn't need to and avoid travel. And we've just come up with a big list of things that we can do online that would benefit them as well. So things of like, we've done the head case, RFU head case that's now open to all the schools online. We're doing a psychology, we're getting one of the lecturers to do a psychology online using Teams to set some goal settings and how to deal with pressure, bits and pieces like that. We got drugs and supplement presentation that we were going to do just to keep them informed of what they can and cannot do as they're starting to get older and go into the gym, and what to avoid and what not to avoid. And using Microsoft tools as well, we're asking them what they've learned in the first part of the term, what they want to do, what their outcome goals are. Also making it fun with quizzes and things like that. But one of the big things we've looked at is how they analyse themselves and how they analyse others. So we're having a big focus on, with the autumn internationals coming up at the moment, and with the Six Nations just finished, what they do when they watch a game. Yes, we want them and encourage them to watch it and enjoy it as a fan, but sometimes just to clue in on their position or why that person's actually doing that. So we're doing a lot of online stuff with why and how to analyse teams and positions, just to help them improve individually. And that could be a guy that's right at the elite level, or someone who's just a club player, just how to just in their own way while they're watching rugby.
Really good. Thanks, Keith. I mean, I think I'm just conscious of time and everything, but Chris, there's some bits that you've done to support that, and logistically and.
Yeah, I think the key is while we're thinking that we're in a maybe an enviable position where we've got lots of resources, I think that for a lot of colleges, I think that when you've got someone who is keen to be involved in rugby, doing it remotely and finding resources online, you can go to your local rugby club and see if you can. There are HIT sessions that you can do. We've got a link with a local gym, and they are instructing things. We're going to make a contribution because for charity, but in essence, some of our academy students can go on and have those sessions delivered remotely, not by us, because maybe our staff don't have the confidence all the time to deliver them. So I think that the element now is being creative in what you're doing and just trying to engage, and in essence keeping contact with students who we're all aware could be going to different sports or could be losing faith in rugby and finding other things to do. So we have got enviable resources available, and in essence Keith is doing a great job in his team. But I think other colleges who look at it and think, where am I going to deliver? How am I going to keep with these things? We've got some ideas there that potentially they could use.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Chris. So actually that leads us nicely into Dale, really, because of course this, as a Wednesday, posed you some different challenges. And I know a lot of colleges will be asking, actually, what about the players that actually, look at rugby or come to rugby purely as an enrichment opportunity? So you've put this together, haven't you?
That's right. So yeah, like I say, we're very much a participation, and our senior management made a decision for lockdown. We aren't having those training sessions over these 4 weeks period, so it's sort of forced our hand in some respects. So what we've gone to do is similar to what Keith said there. We've looked at the IRB webpage and the laws of the game online. Little qualification that learners can do. Obviously, improving their understanding of the laws is always worth doing. And that line-out question is a tricky one, Mike, as we've discussed in the past. Yeah. So anyone who does that, you might give yourself a bit of time with that. Similar to what Keith said with the autumn internationals or autumn nationals Nations Cup. Sorry, what we've looked to do there is they've all picked a player now that we've started to get the teams selections. And they're going to do some analysis on those games over the weekend. Now, for any of the colleagues out there that are also delivering the BTEC, they're using that towards the analysis of sports performance assignment 2, where they have to pick a player and do some analysis of them. So we're trying to use it as an opportunity to actually create evidence for their main course of study as well. We've also looked to use that for the sports coaching unit, where obviously we're looking at what we're going to do when we can go back and have these enrichment sessions. And we've set them an assignment for the sports coaching unit where they're using a constraints-led approach to coaching to see what they could do with a Rugby Ready and maybe just tweak it a little bit and create a new form of the game. Obviously, following all of the recommendations, but some little tweaks that are tying into maybe the way that we're trying to play the game. So again, using it as a natural opportunity to create some evidence for their main course of study.
Yeah, which is bad. And again, it's just that engagement with the players, isn't it, during this difficult 3-4 weeks. Lots of different ideas there, actually, that we can just keep the appetite for rugby. And I think, as Keith alluded to already, the Autumn Nations Cup coming up, that's a great chance to try and link it in with that and keep that buzz going. So when we're ready to hit the ground, come through. Thanks for that, guys. Anyway, I know we're starting to run low on time and everything. So we're just going to wrap up our conversation, actually. And we're just going to finish off with just putting out another poll out to the group in terms of actually from those discussions, and actually Ready for Rugby came up quite a lot in terms of actually what people have done, actually. So if we have a look at that question there. So what would help now deliver Ready for Rugby? So if you could, your answers here and insights, any feedback on this would be really helpful. So if you could, those of you listening, please help us with that. The poll should be up now. That's great. And while those answers are coming in, I'll just, Chris, Keith, Dale, thanks very much, guys. I appreciate your time. So it's not always easy just to put your cameras on when there's lots of people listening, or it's just, it's not as easy as that face-to-face opportunity, is it? But thanks for that, guys. I think there's lots of information there that we can share. And I think there's some bits and pieces that have been coming through the chat as well that we can share. And I know, Dale and Chris, you've pulled some bits together, haven't you? And some slides and everything. So we'll make sure that gets passed on to Elise and that can be passed out along with this recording and stuff.
Yeah, we can send our email addresses if people want to get in touch and ask any questions, then we can have further conversations with them. So.
That's fab. That's fab. Thanks, guys. So brilliant. Thanks very much, fellas. The polls are in, so that gives us some great insight on that, which is fab. Okay, so guidance and everything like that. So that's brilliant. I will now hand back over to Martin Tucker, of course, the chair of England Colleges. We've got that results there from the poll, which is fab, and we will now be able to transfer over for the panel session. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Mike. And thanks again to colleagues Dale, Chris and Keith for their input into that. It's much appreciated. Some interesting comments, some interesting observations. Again, it just demonstrates the appetite for the game in the sector. And equally, the flexibility that colleges and staff in colleges can apply to their various situations. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to move on to the Q&A. And the panel for the Q&A is myself, Mark Saltmarsh and Dean Hardman, who you've already heard from. And in addition, Malcolm Wharton CBE. Malcolm is the council representative for the England Colleges Rugby Union on the RFU, former principal of Hartbury College, well-respected figure in the game and highly respected in the college sector. So that's your panel. We've had some really good questions in advance. Can I thank everybody for those? Mike is going to monitor any questions you've got as we go through this Q&A, and we look to try and include as many of them as possible. Can I just say before I go into the first question, a number of the questions we had, we feel have probably been answered from the input from Mark, Dean and Mike and others. So hopefully we have covered those points, but there are a few that we don't think we've covered yet, and we'll deal with those. So please be proactive in asking any other questions. Without any further ado, we're going to move to a first question. And the question is, what's happening to international rugby? And I'm going to pass over to Malcolm for that one. Malcolm.
Thank you, Martin. Morning, everyone. Before I answer that question, just in terms of activity that perhaps your students could engage with, the RFU are on their YouTube channel, England Rugby YouTube channel, Sunday mornings, putting on some age grade training sessions for under 18s. So that will be starting a Sunday fitness and rugby activity live streams on the England Rugby YouTube channel. So you may wish to make a note of that and flag it up to your interested students. In terms of international rugby, well, it's crystal ball gazing as it is with COVID, really. But what we've got this autumn, the Southern Hemisphere nations didn't want to travel, understandably. because of the COVID situation. So we've got this Autumn Nations Cup, 2 pools, England, Georgia, Ireland and Wales in one, France, Scotland, Italy and Fiji in the other. They all play each other, and then there's a playoff. Number 1 in the pool plays the other number 1 from the other pool, and so on. So those 4 games for each nation. It's Fiji and Georgia have joined the 6 nations for that Autumn Nations Cup. 6 Nations is still scheduled to go ahead on its original dates that have been well published in advance, although there is some talk that, subject to COVID and perhaps relaxation, a little more time could be given and those dates could be moved. But that is just very much a preliminary thought. At the present time, the 6 Nations is scheduled to go next February, March as on its original dates, with some talk of flexibility moving that back if there's a chance that the vaccinations, and I heard this morning there's going to be some rollout of an instant test, gives you a result in 5 minutes and gives you potentially a 24-hour window when you can mingle. But that's, let's wait and see. But at the present time, that is it's the 6 Nations as normal next spring. With regard to the future, well, status quo, 6 Nations, and then the Autumn Internationals with the Southern Hemisphere nations coming up in the autumn. But there is this proposal from World Rugby to try and get an agreed global playing calendar. Now, as part of that, it's also proposed that there is a World Championship. And I guess that may depend to some extent on the venture capitalists that are showing interest in rugby now. They've already invested CVC in the Premiership and the Pro 14, and they're in dialogue with the 6 Nations. And of course, venture capitalists have shown an interest in this embryonic World Championship. If that happens, the 6 Nations will continue as normal, probably on similar dates to it is now, and the championship in the Southern Hemisphere will continue. Then they will annually, each nation will play each other, so that you will get an annual world champion. I believe that will only happen in the 2 years in a 4-year cycle when we don't have Lions and the World Cup. So the status quo, when we're through COVID, is the base position, but exciting dialogue around a World Championship where the 6 Nations and the Rugby Championship continue in their hemispheres, and then the nations come together and play. Everyone plays everyone to determine a world champion, and there may even be a playoff to determine that final world champion. And then, of course, international, we've got the Lions to look forward to. I see this morning South Africa has just opened up for tourists again, so it looks like the Lions will be going to South Africa at the end of this season. So that's where we are internationally, Martin.
Malcolm, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Hopefully some exciting times ahead and some good viewing for us all. Next question, this is going to go to Mark. How are the RFU looking to establish the sport within inner city locations? Good question. Mark.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, we've done, as many of you will be aware, we've done a lot of work, particularly around the 2015 Rugby World Cup in England, on trying to extend the game into beyond its traditional heartlands, I guess. And all schools was our big drive on bringing the game to, particularly in the age grade game, to a whole new group of young people. And we achieved last year our target of 750 new rugby playing secondary schools. Now, a number of those players clearly go off into college environments when they reach 16. So a lot of the work that we've done in the past to try and, in partnership with ECRFU and AFC Sport, to try and make sure that the game is vibrant, available, inclusive within the college environment across the board, has been linked into that. There are challenges, as Malcolm talked about on the last one of these, around our ability to be able to invest in programs. Our revenue is under pressure, as everyone's aware, and nothing has been sacred. So we've had to look at programs like Kids First, like our Focus College program, some of our universities' work, and our support to our clubs as well. And that has been reduced. So we're having to look really carefully about how we invest. But the drive to take the game to new areas, to grow it beyond our traditions, is absolutely still there and part of our strategic approach. So we'll be working really closely with yourselves, Martin, at ECRFU, and other partners to do that.
Thanks very much, Mark. Thank you for that. Yes, we will be working very closely with Mark, and obviously we're there to support colleagues in any way we can. And the person who asked the question and other colleagues from the inner cities, if they want to get directly in touch with John Hull, the chairman of our development committee, for an initial chat, we'd welcome that, and I'm sure John will as well. Okay, thanks, Mark. Move on to the next question. This is quite specific, but I think again it can relate to many of our colleges and many of the links that people are trying to establish. The question is, the amount of rugby available to FE students has decreased year upon year since we set our partnership up with Scunthorpe Rugby Club. Previously, we've participated in monthly regional festivals, but the amount of game opportunities decreased year on year. What are the future plans to increase game time and festival type activity? Dean, can we go to you for that one?
Yep. Yeah, I think obviously I've kind of can't really comment on what went on in the past, but it's interesting that that there appears to still be demand for some of those activities that are referenced in the question. I think it probably also depends on whether we're talking about the men's game, the women's game, and whether we're talking about, I guess, if you like, established players or participation festivals for newer players or lapsed players. But I think from our point of view, we probably have focused, from what I understand, on a league programme, and that the less formal rugby is probably, as the question suggests, less prevalent than it was. We'd be very happy to look at establishing some small-sided festivals, particularly on non-league weeks when we're out of COVID. What I would say is that, you mentioned John Hall and the ECRFU Development Committee. I know that group that has now been re-established is looking at this subject in a lot of detail, and we've agreed from an AOC Sport perspective to be part of that group. John and the team are looking at what geographical spread we need to cover, and I'd be optimistic that the work of that group will result in more of these opportunities moving forwards.
Dean, thanks very much indeed for that. Malcolm, Mark, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would just add, Martin, I'd endorse what Dean has said. That the work that's being done under John's group to look at the festival approach is really key, isn't it? Because that probably in the college sector, and certainly in the 16 to 19 age group, is really critical. And it goes a little bit back to what I said at the end of my piece earlier on. We've got to find ways to keep people engaged, and particularly those who are at risk of easily saying, I'm not going to bother with rugby because it's too difficult at the moment. The festival approach, the fun, turn up, have a laugh, do some rugby, that is going to be one of the real keys actually to this generation of rugby players still playing. Some of the people that are involved in the game at the higher ends of our academies in some of our colleges, they will find rugby, or rugby will find them. We've got to think about those who that won't happen for, and this festival work will do that.
Just one, sorry, I should have said the reason I kind of distinguish between the men's and women's game is my understanding is that there have been in recent times some festivals for female players, and my understanding is through the work of the ECRFU and others that those have been very successful. So I guess we probably are talking here about male and female players that are either have lapsed from playing rugby or perhaps haven't yet been introduced to the game. I mean, one pipe dream I had, and I think, at the moment it's looking increasingly unlikely given where we are with COVID, but I would love some college sport festivals that we can coordinate at AOC Sport in effectively a summer activity that kind of incorporates not just rugby, informal rugby opportunities, but other summer sport opportunities as well. That, we've had great conversations with England Rounders, various other NGBs, that I think if we could offer the whole college a range of opportunities on the same day with a social feel, ideally a barbecue and all the rest, and music playing, I think they'd be fantastic. The chances of us having a vaccine and being able to go and enjoy each other's company in the summer, unfortunately, I suspect that might not happen this coming summer, but it's something that we're really looking at, and we'd love rugby union to be part of that concept.
Yeah, all I'd say, Martin, is that I agree with everything that's been previously said. The AOC league structure is fine for some colleges, but for others, a more flexible approach has to be put in, and festivals are very much part of that. So very, very supportive of that move. And I should have mentioned when I was talking about the future of the internationals, it's fairly obvious, but 85% of the RFU income is derived from England home games and the revenues that are generated by that from TV, from ticket sales, from hospitality. And so it's critical for the investment in colleges and the game elsewhere that we get back to a normal international program with a number of home games at Twickenham to drive the economics of the union. And of course, that goes without saying that the clubs and PRL are also keen to have as many home games as possible to generate revenue for themselves. And we've still got to bottom that out and ensure that our players only play a set number of games that enables them to perform and have a life after rugby. So that debate is still ongoing. It's not finished yet by any means.
Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks all. I think what it demonstrates, just very quickly before I move on to the next question, ECRFU, working with the RFU and AOC, we're really committed to the festival idea. The key thing is, Mark sounded like he was summing up one of my former lessons, just turn up, have some fun. I'm sure an inspector wrote that once. I think it's important that going forward, we really do that. The key thing and the key drive of ECRFU is participation and getting those numbers sustained within the college sector. So thanks for that. Can I move to the next question? Sorry, Mark, I'm going to come to you again for this one. Question is, can you gain coaching badges by volunteering?
Yeah, easy answer is yes, Martin. And actually in the kit bag, in the column in the kit bag around training, etc., we've got an updated webinar going in there. So the version that arrives in the next, hopefully, as I say, 24 hours, I should have said 48, shouldn't I? We'll actually have a piece in there around the new coaching and refereeing structure. So that can be accessed through there.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Next question. This is an interesting one. It's an ongoing debate. When we are able to play ready for rugby fixtures, are they able to be under 19 fixtures? I'll just start answering this and then I'll pass over to Mark. The answer is we're currently really looking into this. There's been a lot of questions around the playing of under 19 fixtures, and we're looking at all the issues related to that. I think the reason why the question has come about is largely as a result, strangely, of lockdown, increased numbers of students not progressing onto apprenticeships, etc., and many colleges finding that their year 12 numbers, as it were, have increased dramatically. So, and going forward, that could be an ever-growing picture. So we are in ECRFU with our RFU and AOC colleagues looking at this at the moment, and we hope to get some information out to the sector as soon as possible. Mark, do you want to add any more to that?
Yeah, just in terms of the real practicality, Martin, thanks. Our regulations, if the game is played non-contact, then our regulations do allow cross-age group rugby to be played. That includes adults playing with non-adults as well. It's under regulation 15 that can be done. So you could play, to answer the question directly, you could play to under 19s with under 18s, under 16s, etc. Because it's non-contact. That is the regulation, though. If any contact is involved at all beyond ready for rugby or O2 touch, then that is against regulation. So, but the regulations are flexed for the non-contact formats of the game.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, next question. What is the current Focus College status? Mark, again.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, Martin. We've had, unfortunately, Focus College is one of the areas where we've had to make a cut to our programme. We still want to work with those colleges that are involved, but from a revenue point of view, we're not going to be able to offer the grants that we offered before. And what we're trying to do now that we've got Mike and Chris back actually in work, although we are going back on furlough part-time as well, which scuppers things a little bit. But now that we have got a team of people back, we're able to pick up some of these programmes that we've had to be mothballed for the last 6 months. We still want to work with those colleges, as we do with all colleges who are playing rugby. And the aim, as I said earlier, is to try and make sure that everyone has some sort of rugby programme back up and running who had a rugby programme running in March.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. We have had a question linked to funding and the impact of funding and cuts on the RFU and how that will potentially affect funding for the colleges sector. Malcolm's already started to allude to that in terms of funding from and the income that comes from internationals, etc. But Malcolm, Mark, do you want to add any more to that particular question?
Well, no, it's very difficult. It's crystal ball gazing again. The RFU executive and board are looking at various scenarios, and it's all dependent on the outcome of COVID, when we get it under control, when we get back to a new normal, when we can start inviting crowds back into the international game. And so there are various scenarios, from best case, medium case, and worst case scenarios, all of which impact upon. One thing's for certain, revenue will fall. The ECRFU grant from the RFU will be cut, but to what extent it will be cut and the final impact of COVID is yet to be determined. But clearly the impact will mean there'll be fewer staff, RFU funded staff on the ground that colleges can lock into, and the grants that we've been able to give and the grants that the RFU have been able to give to colleges are likely to be reduced going forward.
I'd just add to that, Martin, just on the point that Malcolm makes about staff. As many of you know, we've made some really significant cuts over well over 100 people, unfortunately, are made redundant, and that's 100 really good quality, engaging people that many of the people on this webinar will have worked with. We're having to then now think really differently about how we do things. We have to do much more from the centre, which is how many other governing bodies of sport work anyway. So we're able to learn from what they've done. And organisations like ECRFU, like AOC Sport, have a similar structure with less people out on the ground, but a really strong central way of working. So this type of thing, we're going to do much more of this and work in partnership much more with those who are doing it alongside us as well. But that will take time to bed in. But that's going to need to be our approach.
Mark, thanks for that. And obviously incredibly difficult times, colleagues, but certainly we do appreciate the continued support of Mark and his team at the Rugby Union. But we'll keep you updated. That's the key thing. We'll keep you updated on how things progress. We haven't had any questions through the additional questions. One final question that I'm going to address now, and then a couple of other things. Question came in: how do you become a member of England Colleges RFU? We don't want to make it in any way a very difficult process. It's very straightforward. I would suggest anybody who currently isn't a member, we'd greatly encourage you to join. It's free. That's always a good sign. But I strongly advise that you contact our Honorary Secretary, Elisa, whose details you will have. And Elisa can give you all the details of how to join. But the question was, what are the benefits? I think the biggest benefit is the networking, is the sharing that you're seeing today within the webinar. It's a very open, transparent union. We're all working for one goal, and that's for our students in the college sector and to provide a high quality rugby product at all levels. So there's lots of benefits. We have representation currently through Malcolm on the RFU Council. So we have the opportunity to voice the college position at the very highest level. We have representation on a lot of RFU committees. We have a very active board and various other committees, all with a common goal, and that is colleges rugby. So I'm sure that current members will see that there is benefits to it, working closely as well with the AOC Sport in the development of our competitive program. So please, if you are interested in joining us, we welcome you. Please contact Elisa. Now, before I finish and wrap up this webinar, I just want to hand over to Elisa, who I think wants to conduct a quick poll, and then it will come back to me and I'll just add a couple of concluding statements. So Elisa, over to you. Okay, colleagues, so there's the poll. If you can answer that would be really helpful.
Yeah, the poll's up there. If you just add your answers, that would be really great. Thank you.
Thanks, Elisa. Okay. So colleagues, I know how precious your time is. Again, a huge thank you for giving up your time to join this webinar. Couple of sort of parish notices, as it were. The Rugby in a Bag offer, which has been great to see the uptake of that. Logistically, there's been a slight delay in getting that out, but they're due to be sent out the week beginning the 23rd of November. So please look out for that arrival at your respective college. A number of the things that we've talked about during the various presentations, but also in the Q&A, just to reaffirm that at ECRFU, we have some task and finish groups that are working at the moment on 3 particular areas, which we've touched on: under 19 review, which I mentioned, women's and girls rugby, a key focus, and trying to build on the tremendous success of the women's team, the England women's team, and also participation festivals, which I know was a focus of a couple of the questions today. So finally, a big thank you to the contributors today, to Dale, Chris, Keith, and for Mike for hosting that particular part of the webinar, to our panelists, to Malcolm Wharton, Dean Hardman and Mark Saltmarsh, and finally a big thank you to Elisa, who as always has done all the hard work behind the scenes in bringing this together with her very trusted team, John, Pete, etc. And finally, keep in touch, keep doing all you can to promote the game. The support is there from ECRFU, and I wish you every success during these difficult times, but hopefully we can see some light at the end of the tunnel and we can look forward to returning to something vaguely looking like normal. But I will do all I can as the chair to promote the game and support any issues that you've got. So please remain in contact, and good luck. And thanks for joining today, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you all very much indeed. Have a good day.